All right, welcome back, folks, to the Winter Series hosted by EGC here in day number 2. And we are rounding out day number 1 still, actually. This series had to be postponed due to how late it was running, but we're finally going to get it. It's going to be an exciting one as well. FTWcheese versus FreeDB. FreeDB, fantastic player. Top 20 in the rankings, has been slam dunking people in the ladders, and now getting to slam dunk them in the tournaments, already knocking out the Mister before this. That was the round which, by the way, took a long time to resolve. It's why they had to delay this until today before the day 2 games kick off. And his opponent FTWcheese needs some credit of his own. He did actually manage to smash through Hera to get his way here to this semifinals before day 2 kicks off. And I'm excited to see how it's going to play out because we have got the Mongol on Mongol matchup. Remember, folks, the way that this works is at the beginning of the series, a Civ gets banned. After that occurs, and it is revealed, both of them blind pick a Civ. But keep in mind that once you play that Civ, you cannot play it again. And surprise, surprise, so often is the case, we see both players opening up with the powerful, omnipotent Mongols. And this time, similar spawns. You notice the Uvus, both sides, actually ahead of their TC towards their opponent, gives them the opportunity for aggression. And let's see if that aggression is going to be mirrored, because both of them are going into racks. With identical timings as well. FTWcheese just getting that little bit extra optimization in terms of villager travel distance, right? One extra out from the Uvu. Meanwhile, FreeDB sticks us a little bit closer. But the interesting part's going to be with this positioning, they'll be able to actually get the Deerstone built right next to their TC, and they'll be able to buff their spear lines to run forward into battle. But FreeDB already a little bit behind his opponent here, and he's not building into the spears yet. So he has the racks as a reactionary element, but he's not choosing to opt into it just yet. This should change soon, though. And FreeDB, almost patented at this stage, right, his opening. He always loves to go for this second scout, or in this case, his first scout, right, because you're playing Mongols with a Khan. And this allows him to do the transferal that we've seen him, and I believe Marine Lord does it quite frequently as well, right? You'll gather as many sheep as possible, and then you'll do the pass over to the other scout, because you want to keep the Khan aggressively positioned, because one, he can get out of bad positions quickly with the maneuver arrows, and two, he's able to harass where there's opportunities via, although it's a measly 2 damage, it's still 2 damage that isn't easily contested in the early game by your opponent. So Spear's now coming out, now that he's eyeballed what's happening here. Nice dodge out just in time, and it looks like the sheep are out of range as well, so no way of taking that away from him. Very important to secure additional sheep in this matchup. Keep in mind that a detail that tends to get overlooked is that the Mongols can heavily rely on the sheep. Only about half of them, it feels like, go into the professional scouts, and you don't have the opportunity to transition to farms, right? You have to go for pastures, which are more pricey, and then eventually give you that infinite sheep. The reason they're more pricey, by the way, is because, of course, when you gather from sheep, it's a quicker gathering rate than by default from farms, as well as from berry bushes. So the only things that really tend to beat it out for the Mongols is gathering from deer and the boars, of course. Both not being an option right now, especially these openings, considering that usually if you were going to go for pro scouts and gather up the deer carcasses, you would have dropped a stable instead of a racks. The reason they don't, by the way, is because it is a Mongol-Mongol matchup. If you do that, you're always risking your opponent having a racks and having spears, and then causing a little bit of anarchy for you in the early game. So FTWcheese still on the prowl up here. FreeDB never went to this area, so it's always possible he finds this few sheep, but as we can see, there's none left. In fact, I think they've picked it dry. There's only like wildlife that you can't tame now, right? So this is the final sheep that needs to be drawn back. And I believe the edge, yeah, most definitely the edge is with FreeDB on this map right now. FTWcheese does have the nearby berry bush, that's not the end of the world, and it is close enough that he protects it. And I like this kind of retracted gold line opening for him. It's actually favorable in the spawn compared to what FreeDB got. FreeDB's is a lot more exposed and dangerous, and it should be noted that the way these gold veins play out for the most are going to push him further away from safety. A very important detail in a Mongol-on-Mongol matchup, because if you go on that 20-25 minute mark point, you're talking about step readout, right? You're talking about collecting aggressively from these gold veins and stripping them dry. And if you look at the layout for FTWcheese, he keeps pulling away from the action, whereas FreeDB's eco line is likely to push forward towards the center of the map, where it might be more exposed. Looks like FreeDB teching up. FTWcheese only just a little bit behind him. These guys so far neck and neck. And this is the difference, right? Already FTWcheese is going to be forced to start building the pastures. FreeDB, if he wants, can wait a little bit longer because he has that additional food coming in from the extra sheep he gathered. And this is the importance. This is the power of doing it, folks. I think it's so important, not only for gathering sheep, but also for superior vision to have a secondary scout. And I think we're going to see more and more top-level players engaging with this as a result. But For the Win Cheese for the moment. Doing good on the eco, actually. He's actually 2 units ahead. And that number doesn't make much sense, really. I think FreeDB must have missed the mark here at some point. He wasn't able to just keep pushing out villagers because he should be 1 behind, not 2. But it is exactly 2. So somehow For the Win Cheese did manage to eke out an edge here, despite surrendering over the sheep early. And that is going to matter because it means it's a little bit easier to push across these pastures. It is still going to stun him a little bit. The thing that this gives access to for FreeDB, by the way, with this many sheep carcasses still here, instead of going for the early pastures, he could transition into an archery range ahead of his opponent, but he's going for the pasture now. And he is putting it next to the Uvu. I love this. And similar coming out now from For the Win Cheese. Just logical on both sides, right? They're not expecting early aggression. Any aggression they think that they're going to mirror and be able to counter out directly in even numbers. So they're going to play that more chill style. And now, FreeDB moving the spears in. With the Khan as well. The Khan who's going to get sniped! FreeDB! He was looking back at his own base for a moment there. He wasn't spotting that out. So he does lose the Khan. The Khan gives over the maneuver already, but you're outnumbered here. Can you out-micro is the question. Right now, he's actually trading evenly. This isn't too bad considering FreeDB is outnumbered, but it might get bad in a second. He didn't finish off this Spearman, who was heavily damaged already. He's going to shift across to it now. In the end, For the Win Cheese is going to be 1 up, and the important detail is his Khan's still alive. FreeDBs get sacrificed in quite the precarious fashion. And it's awkward as well, because look where For the Win Cheese's Khan is. If you drew your Khan back, you would have been able to kite and add in additional damage, 4 extra damage, right? And that might have given you the edge to kill off all the spears in base at the moment and force your opponent to more aggressively replace them. But instead, you're the one running away. Scout having a little bit of a whoopsie-daisy, trying to get eyeballs on if there's a transition at all. Run, little sheep, run. Don't fall like this. And meanwhile, the Khan over here now able to be very frustrating for his opponent, and there's no counter to it, right? You can't reach him. He can always back away. He'll occasionally snipe out a villager here or there, possibly, and that's something FreeDB now has to keep an eyeball on. And he's still got 50 seconds until his Khan is going to be back up. For those wondering, these best of threes, the way it works is we do open on the same map on Lipany, and then after that, it's different map choices based on, I think, the person who lost. So you can get everything except for, I believe it's Archipelago, Warring Islands, and Ancient Spires. Those are the only ones that are not allowed right now. Because I think Ancient Spires has some weird kind of bug related to the map generation that makes it very unbalanced, if I'm not mistaken. But everything else is game. You can get some Black Forest, you can get some Boulder Bay. We actually haven't seen any Boulder Bay. I don't think we've seen a single war map so far out of all the games we've covered. Everyone's just dodging it right now, staying on the land. Kind of understandable. I think it's very overpowering how easily you can lose a game if you lose control of the waterfronts. Wow, the value For the Win Cheese is getting out of this. The difference maker, right? The fact that he has that Khan still. Injuring 2 of these spearmen, killing a 3rd one off. And just starting to outmass him right now. Look at the count. FreeDB went very heavily into the economy as well. He's got more pastures down. Meanwhile, look what For the Win Cheese is doing. He's planning to ram rush his opponent early. And I don't know if FreeDB is going to be ready for this. FreeDB is saving. It might be delayed just long enough that he manages to get his tech up, and then he can push out some man-at-arms to counter out the Spear Force. It's going to be tight, though. It depends how quickly For the Win Cheese moves. He's already moving out. Siege Engineering still has 35 seconds left. If he hesitates at all, he's going to allow FreeDB to get that tech up ahead of him, and then he might be in trouble. Well, things said and done, though. For the Win Cheese actually going to be the first one to trigger the step readout being built. FreeDB still hasn't started yet. And remember what we talked about. It's more wonky for him to safely gather the gold. So For the Win Cheese getting the edge on him is problematic right now. Meanwhile, just moving in, getting eyeballs on what's happening. He sees the blacksmiths dropped. He has to anticipate a ram rush might be coming now. He sees that many spears. He sees the blacksmiths down. There's no archery range, so your assessment should be quite easy to come to, right? Your opponent is planning to come in early. Now, the difference maker, right? The fact that he went for the improved siege engineering and the fact he's about to hit up into Castle Age means he doesn't have to opt necessarily into a ram. He's going to have access to the mangonels. And that might change how FreeDB has to pivot. Question is, how can you pivot in this situation? Your plan was probably to go into man-arms, maybe get an archery range down as well. And that means it's going to be slow static units that are going to clump up and probably get sniped easily by a mangonel. And that's why he's on his way now, but he gets the bad news. Cheese already ahead of him. I don't know who this guy is, by the way. I couldn't find much data on For the Win Cheese. We know that FreeDB has a StarCraft background, But when I search For the Win Cheese, all I really find is an inactive Twitch page, which he told me. I checked with him. I was like, is there any shout-outs? Is there anywhere you want me to point people towards? And he said, no shout-outs needed. Haven't got anything to push towards. But I think, you know, for reference, For the Win Cheese, he's been playing in a few of these small content creator tournaments, you know, like $150 ones that are being ran by different YouTube channels. And usually he's ranking somewhere between 5th and 1st in these, right? He's beating out people like B, in fact. In fact, I think the last one they played was actually just a few days ago. It was one of the Gran Torino ones. And B got beaten out by For the Win Cheese. Cheese did in the end lose to Wham, but the important part is that FreeDB ranked behind Cheese in that tournament. There we go. Castle Age reached. So a little bit later than his opponent, but he moves straight across hard onto the line. But he has less people than Cheese, so Cheese still able to outscale him at the stage. He needs to move this Gur, though. Big mistake here. Seeing the drop-offs, right? He's missing out on a lot of additional gold because they're dragging it over to there. And that's the difference, right? Look, FreeDB, he already draws it away. There's no longer the pesky little Gur here stripping away your additional gold that you get from dropping off the step readout. Because remember, drop-offs there give an additional 50% gold. And there's the Mangonel in the fields we were talking about. Villagers will back away before they are slain. And they do get the outpost down. And that will spot out the Mangonel spam. So now you need a solution. The problem you have is FreeDB. He never put down a blacksmith. He doesn't have improved siege engineering. He doesn't even have siege engineering. So he doesn't have access to the Springles, which is the counter he needs. And if you're funneling out these very slow man-at-arms, I do worry about how this is going to end for FreeDB. I mean, double Mangonel, the type of damage they're going to do here, you're going to be down to about half HP in the man-at-arms. And now Springle's coming out. For the Win Cheese, reading this in a way that he's worried his opponent might counter out. He doesn't need to be worried about it, though. The counter isn't there. Now Mangonel's hitting is decent, but rush through is good. And there were never man-at-arms coming out from For the Win Cheese, so he's going to lose one of these Mangonels. The second one's going to fall as well. So the man-at-arms can now take the advantage here up against For the Win Cheese. Bit of a mistake, I think. And I think he still doesn't have man-at-arms coming out. No, it's just spears. Spear spam non-stop. This is the problem right now. For the Win Cheese, he didn't have surplus wood to build additional buildings to push out units, right? He couldn't trip racks like FreeDB done because he went for the double Mangonel. And it was a very greedy play that was not backed by the right force. You had to anticipate when you saw the racks, your opponent has to be going man-at-arms, right? He got so paranoid, though. Instead of investing that surplus into getting another racks or two, getting some man-at-arms ready, he invests it into a Springald, and all of a sudden he loses the entire battalion. And that's the cancel the Mangonel as well. Full retreat. The income numbers do look good for Cheese, but this is not a Cheese gameplay right now. This is getting cheesed, if anything, by the man-at-arms spam. And after he pushes him back, this should be the chill moment. He has to understand that Cheese could start to transition to man-at-arms. He wants to get rid of the opportunity to do so by sniping out the racks. And this doesn't take long. The Mangonel might cause problems, though. They built a new one. And that'll force him to back away. So breathing space achieved for Cheese. And rebuilding the Mangonel army. And now that he's going into the man-at-arms, next time he will be able to protect himself. The question is whether FreeDB is going to be ready. He now has a blacksmith, and he's getting the siege engineering. So he'll be able to match his opponent soon. Needs to buy more time in the meantime. Nice dodge out there. Bait the Mangonel to shoot in the wrong place. And one of them's already been sniped out. There's not enough man-at-arms here for Cheese to protect himself. And that means another costly loss for the Mongol player in red. He's going to protect the second Mangonel with the repairs coming out from the villages. But that means the man-at-arms can now snipe into your economy. And you see the engagement right now. It's still a decent trade for FreeDB despite the numbers being against him because it's spears versus swords. And he'll move away. Snipes free. I think it was maybe 4 of these villages. Eco count now 45 compared to the 45. So that advantage that Cheese built up is gone. Siege engineering. This is the important part. It bought the time, right? It's now about to be completed, and then in the stealth forest, he can begin to construct his own siege weapons. Pressure's on. Cheese, how will he respond? More Mangonels? Really? So no intent to get Springles to protect him anymore. He just wants enough Mangonels to instantly wipe the army of FreeDB. He doesn't realize his opponent has now gone into the blacksmiths, right? He might anticipate it, but for him, the core concept, the most important detail is that he wins that initial clash of arms. And he'll be able to. FreeDB doesn't have surplus. He has no siege weapons at all. He does have the vision advantage right now in the stealth forest, but only counts for so much. And Khan, still not spawning for 45 seconds. Remember, Cheese lost his in that last fight, which means he's going blind into the tree line. And FreeDB is going to let him have it. He surrenders it over. Very surprising choice there. but paranoid, right? He sees that many Mangonels coming, he has no solution, and now he has problems. Moves Deerstone to the front. Understands that now his opponent is not going to have the movement speed, right? Neither of these players, keep in mind, prioritized outposts. They're playing against another Mongol player. It's hard to defend them in this back and forth. They don't want to risk giving over those freebies, right? That 50 gold and 50 food, as well as spending 70 with yourself. So we haven't seen a prioritization on outposts, even on the home field. And that's a big difference compared to a lot of these players we've been seeing, even when it's Mongol on Mongol. Because remember, when you go to Castle Age and you juice everyone with Yam speed, you don't have to wonkily place this Deerstone. This Deerstone that's now potentially exposed in its positioning. Blacksmith's backing away. And time to burn the deer down. Doesn't want to hard commit. He doesn't know that his opponent has no Mangonels. Remember, he hasn't got vision game, right? His Khan's still not here. He's respawned, but Cheese hasn't got him out just yet. He's on his way. Charge in with the maneuver arrow straight on top of the Deerstone as well. Now the Mangonels all going to be sniped out. And the count right here. 27 to the 6 man-at-arms. 3DB with the Zerg factor is going to wipe everything here. And he calls the GG. He knows it's over. What a play out of 3DB. The patience shown. The advantage in the last fight when he pushes in the most important details that he sniped that Khan. If the Khan was still there for Cheese, this game potentially plays out differently. You don't get that extra breathing room. And when the pushing comes, your opponent might be better prepared with a maneuver arrow of his own. And you saw how close it was. Cheese just 5-10 seconds away from drawing his Khan back into the front line. Had he got it there, potentially he pulls back, peels another load of Mangonel shots, and this game gets a little bit more interesting. But well played by 3DB to understand when transitions are needed and when they're not. He understood that with a 3 racks advantage, his opponent could never match the man-at-arms count. And as we saw, if you kept trading out evenly, it meant that Cheese never reached that surplus quantity required to form a front line and block his opponent from reaching behind him. So, great game to open up the series. Hopefully, we get a little bit more back and forth, though. This one could have went either way, in fairness. I do think the Khan snipes are what mattered, especially in a Khan-on-Khan matchup, a Mongol-on-Mongol matchup. Getting rid of your opponent's Khan is a huge detriment to their game. You have to remember, by Castle Edge, you have 3 different arrows, and that gives you a lot of tactical flexibility in fights. Tactical flexibility that a lot of civs don't have, right? Whether it's the maneuvers we saw used there, or an attack speed buff for range units, or even the armor sometimes can be an effective choice. It does make a difference, and it made the difference here with that maneuver arrow, giving 3DB the lead now. 1 game up in this best of 3, but still at least 1 game ahead of us. So let's see how that one's going to play out. All right, it is going to be the China-China matchup, and it's going to be on Black Forest again. Okay, this was a very fun map yesterday when we saw it between, I believe it was Vortex and Marine Lords. So I'm excited and buzzed to see what's going to happen this time around. No puns intended with Mr. B in the lobby, but he is already 1 game up, and this is one of his specialist civs. 3DB, honestly, I'd say his top 2 civs, the ones that he loves to just spam the living crap out of, are probably China and the Delhi, right? But as we saw, he's also a formidable Mongol player. I think most players are just choosing Mongol as an opener because, you anticipate your opponent's going to do it, and you're either better or you're not. And if you're not better, like, it's out of the way and you gave yourself an even chance, and you can move on to your more specialist civs. Meanwhile, on the other side, I was a little bit surprised by Cheese doing this. I think it's more because he knows that his opponent likes to do it and it's on Black Forest. If this wasn't Black Forest, I would have expected an alternative out of Cheese. Probably something along the lines of, say, maybe the HRE. I could also have seen him potentially going for like Delhi or Abbasids. But understandably, China, I do think this is one of their better maps. I think that's kind of a weird thing for people to hear, but Black Forest plays into their style quite easily. You get a lot of kind of space to TC boom, and that's where they're powerful, right, is when they're given that room to do so. And with these easy choke points that you can just wall off, it does open that gate to you. Interesting to see if either of these players are going to try to cheesily wall in their opponents. Because keep in mind that yesterday we did see attempts by one person to aggressively wall the other in with layers. And very quickly, it became apparent how ineffective that is when you just chop down 1 or 2 trees and walk around it. So I don't expect anyone to sacrifice their early eco input by dragging a village across map. Do we see the secondary scout that we're so used to out of 3DB, though? 3DB looks like he actually only went for 1 scout on this map. A little bit more understandable, right? There's less to reveal, and there's less pressure on you gathering all the sheep away, because there's so much surplus food, right? The way that Black Forest is designed is that you shouldn't really be forced to push out of your base area for quite a while compared to other maps. So 3DB understands that 1 villager advantage is too big of an eco advantage in a game that's likely to turn into like a 20-25 minute game where you just sit back for the first 15 and farm up on each end. breakdown is very similar, but it looks like 3DB has a slight edge here, right? Yeah, so he's one fishing boat up already over his opponent. Only half the generation, but it's a slight difference that can kind of bump up, right? It sounds very nitpicky, but when we're talking about these one-on-one mirror engagements, you do have to mention these small details, right? If someone has a slight production lead on their dock, if someone, for example, has a slightly better spawn. And from that perspective, their spawns are fairly similar until you look at the gold. And that's when you see a disadvantage for 3DB. Look at this generation, actually. This is absurd. So 3DB has all of his gold pushed up to the north here. Meanwhile, Cheese has it a lot closer. It's a big gap to cover, but plenty of gold here. And look how easy this is for him to do. Moves out, wall's right here. And he's already secured it. Meanwhile, 3DB, if he wants to secure his gold, he has to move a wall here, and then he has to run all the way around and wall here. This definitely feels a bit cursed against B in this game. I mean, this is the type of thing you probably look back at the generation later, and you're just shaking your fist. And quite rightly so, actually. Also the relics. Relics as well. Just so much of it feels slightly better for Cheese. And Scouts dragging their sheep back to base. So 3DB gets eyeballs on what his opponent's doing. He's also read the map now, right? And he has to understand that if they both sit back full stalemate, he's going to run out of resources first. So I expect 3DB to look for a more aggressive opening and a way to breach into Cheese's base sooner. And so far, no signs of TC booming out of either of them, right? Like, they haven't gone feudal yet, yes, but at the same time, usually even before feudal, you have one or two people starting to gather on the stone lines in prep for it. They are both on one imp official. It looks like, yes, Beast came out a little bit later, so slightly less efficient for him, but he did at least have that fishing advantage, and he's got enough surplus to cover the production of the docks units now, right? So he's not suffering on that front. And now Cheese already on his way up. B, he's still missing the tax required. He's going to move across, but he needs one more drop. Oh, no. Oh, God, he's one gold short. That's pure pain. So we'll be able to go back for it now, but this has stunted his growth a little bit. The good news for him is that Cheese only has one person on the Barbican the Sun. Bad news is he will probably only put one person on the Barbican the Sun himself. And more walls is also bad news for 3DB. Remember, you can get around these walls very easily if you send a villager out. But keep in mind, on a 1 TC economy, it's frustrating to have to send one villager out to chop down these tree lines and hang around for that. And look at this greedy play from 3DB. I don't think this was spotted by Cheese either. 3DB is dragging his attention away of his own scout, which means he's covered doing this. And this is such a ballsy play, folks. 3DB, keep in mind he's doing this when he has no walling to protect him. His opponent is the one putting down the palisades. So 3DB's read on this is that his opponent is going to be more defensive and paranoid. And he might be right about this. Cheese opens with a Barbican the Sun. He puts all the walls down. And yes, he does have the majority of the map, but it means that in the meantime, in the initial mid-game transition, B's economy will be stronger than that of Cheese's. And it might give him the opportunity to strike out and secure his chunk of the map before Cheese is ready to respond. And there's the movement onto stone. Cheese just quicker than B to do so. B still not doing it himself, actually. Bit concerning right now. So we'll quickly see him ramp up to be ready. Meanwhile, B, he's got huge surpluses of wood. I expect him to move some people over on a stone right now. In a China on China matchup, I don't think you can play on 1 TC. Especially on a map like Black Forest. You're too delayed getting to your opponent's base, so you have to anticipate he's going to be doing this with the stone gathering. And he's even going back for the Imperial Academy now, which is the preferred opening. If you want to do Song Dynasty, it's much nicer to get the additional value out of the Barbican Sun immediately and then come back for the Imperial Academy. Obviously, you can do it the other way around. Song Dynasty is still amazing. I think like the concept, though, is that you use your defensive landmark because you're paranoid, and then the economical one booms you later to recover that surplus you invested. When you do it the other way around, the only times I like it is when you're putting a super aggressive landmark placement with the Barbican Sun, something that is feasible for China, mind you, considering that they build so much quicker, but we rarely see it. A lot of the times, if someone goes back for the Barbican Sun, they just put it on the edge of their base, and they forget about it. Whereas in this situation, I'd love to see a Barbican the Sun move down to the center near where these relics are, for example, and just give you that heads up and also that zonal denial, right? So your opponent can't easily move through there. But at this rate, it's looking like it's going to be a Castle Age rush out of 3DB. This would give him the edge, keep in mind, right? His opponent has gone for the second TC, so 3DB, he doesn't have this info. He has no way to get eyeballs on, but he does need to move fast, and he's going into the archery ranges now. It's still somewhat scaling, but the gold is suffering right now. He needs to fix that if he wants to get the Castle Age. I would prefer Castle Age under Palace Guard here. The problem with going for Archer spam is, well, for a start, you need to get through these Palisade walls, which, yes, you can do easily enough with the villagers. But once you get to the base, what are you doing with these archers? They're just kind of sitting there waving at the other Chinese people going, why are we fighting? Why are we not one? We're both China, dude. This makes no sense. And they never really get value. Because right now, Cheese's economy is going to be compact underneath these TCs. This sort of play maybe works good in 5-10 minutes, but before that, I'm not so sure. But here we go, 3DB. Trip Ram. And this is one of the problems. This was going to be a hand revealed very early. This is the power of the Palisades, because look at the vision. 3DB, there is no way that he can get through this without Cheese knowing. You could chop through trees, but he's going to notice it. The only hope you have is that because you're not making an attack, he doesn't get alerted. The problem is that when you move these battering rams by and all these units, he's going to see a glance of it on his map, a hostile unit. He's going to read it, and then he should be able to pivot in time to what's coming, which is, of course, the battering ram spam. It's going to have to be fast. And it's going to be stone walls. Wow, okay, that's actually a big deal. You can still go around these, but you can't immediately see through them. I think he needs to stonewall along the sides if he wants this to work. It can be a good play, but he's not even in time. Look at 3DB. He just denies it. And he knows his opponent can't do anything because he has no military presence. Because if he did, he wouldn't be stonewalling. Wow. That changes the game completely. Now, 4 battering rams and a lot of archers are on the move. And remember, you can build these rams in the field so he can move across and add more to his army. And now, Cheese needs a response fast, is into the horsemen en masse. He sees that his opponent only has archers. Remember, they ran past the palisade, so he has that heads-up info. And this is where I'd love to see some pivot out of 3DB. He has surplus food, and that is literally it. Which means he could easily afford Spearmen, but he needs to get the initial income required to get the racks down. And that's what you should be using these villagers for. These villagers that you brought forward would be amazing for exactly that. And remember, this horseman army builds fast. It's being supervised, so these horsemen coming out every 7 seconds. And right now, the economy of Cheese can support this. You can see he's getting over 600 food per minute. Yes, he's using a chunk of that into the villager count, but he's able to get up to the critical mass of horsemen to overwhelm this many archers quite quickly. And B, still no signs of that Rax. He has got a scout, but the scout hasn't eyeballed this. And he could have, is the detail to keep in mind here, right? Like, scout vision is quite large. You would have been able to just dip in, not been in range in TCs, and potentially seen this horseman configuration. You have to anticipate your opponent's doing it, right? Like, what else is he going to be building with this much heads-up info? He can't go spears here. Spears are terrible against archers. Maybe he goes archers himself, but then what about the battering rams? And now in they move. Good to get rid of the scouts if you can. Remember, that's vision now lost, so Cheese feeling a little bit naked for the most. Here come the battering rams. And he's waiting. He's willing to sacrifice the Imperial Academy if need be. Expect him to make a move if pressure goes onto his TC. And that's why 3DB does exactly that. And he goes. And these 4 rams will not take long to dish the damage out, right? It's 200 per ram. So 800 damage every 7 seconds, 5 seconds, I believe it is. Yeah, 5 seconds. There you go. Archer's back up. Horseman trying to trade out. He may jump the gun, though. There's a lot of archers here. I don't know if there's enough horsemen. And even if there is, the damage is already done. The battering ram's done it. That's a TC down. He could just move deeper, chase onto another one if he wants to. And I don't know if the village is going to burn this quick enough. Moves him across now. He's microing in the meantime. The horseman army's almost dead already. And he's backing the rams up because he realizes he doesn't have to rush them in and sacrifice them. In fact, the horsemen are all spent. Cheese has been cheesed by the ram rush here. And more to replace those that are lost. And he'll push in. And he has to know there's not enough horsemen to replace this right now. The GG gets called. Cheese. After all that effort, after all that run, after all that time spent waiting around, having to delay this series an extra day, 3DB is going to rush him off of the court in a 2-0 sweep here. First with the Mongols and then with the Chinese. 3DB, He had a long enough series yesterday, okay? The Mr. One seemed to never end. He doesn't want to wait around. He doesn't want to get fatigued or exhausted. He wants to be ready for what's coming up next because his next opponent probably won't be as easy. That's no offense to Cheese. I think Cheese, he just got outplayed here. Really nicely done. He needed to have some defensive units sooner, and you cannot rely on the Wolves. I think Cheese got caught out by the fact that a lot of players aren't playing Black Forest right now. And as we saw in a series on the previous day, getting around these Wolves is very easy. Run a villager out, chop it down, laugh in their face, plow on through. The only advantage you get at that stage is vision from the walls. Everything else about walling is worthless. You might as well just put down an outpost and achieve similar and waste less time doing so. But not able to actually make that type of heads-up play, gets caught off guard, gets ran through, really well played by 3DB, not wasting any time. I think between these two games, it was less than half an hour. And we'll just have to see how he's going to do because he's got a new opponent, a new challenger, and they should be ready to go in a few hours. The games aren't prepped just yet because we're going to have a delay. But this is a great kind of segue point to point out if you guys are enjoying this content, because this is going to appear on the YouTube channel like they all are. More of the EGC series are going to be up here, along with an additional playlist that's going to be full of AoE 4 pub games, so be sure to check that out. And in the meantime, why don't you hit the subscribe so you catch more of this action as it comes up. But plenty more ahead.